Well, hello, hello, Lolo. How are you?
Hi, Perry. I am doing wonderful. And yourself, my good friend?
I'm doing great. I am marginally excited for what we have to discuss this week. It's a great way to market my own video here, right?
This is this is gonna be a video, guys.
It will be a video. Look, we are working with the material we have on hand,
It's
and
not our fault.
this week we are definitely feeling the effects of what is a bit of a slow section. It seems like Joseph and Oliver probably got over to a church building on one day, got a little bit of new information, decided to just kind of throw some stuff in there, and pretty soon, I mean, they're going to be just cheating off of somebody else's work entirely for a solid 12 chapters. So 13 chapters.
I
It's
was I was trying to figure out who is the more mediocre Mormon author this week. Stephanie Myers,
Joseph Smith.
Joseph Smith, Stephanie Myers, Joseph Smith.
you
I don't
know,
know. It's
I, um, I will say this for Stephanie Meyer. At least she has vampires. I mean, could you imagine the Book of Mormon with vampires? I'm just saying.
it would
Um,
raise some. It would raise its level for me just a little bit.
like honestly,
It
yeah,
needs
it
it.
would
It
be.
needs something. The plot's
And
a little missy in some places,
yeah,
Joseph.
I mean, the most exciting thing that's going to happen here is we are going to have a change in voice from Nephi to Jacob, and it's just there. It just all of a sudden, and yeah, but yeah, it's the Book of Mormon. People know what they're getting at this point in time, and now that we are no longer in the section where we can kind of just shove in biblical scholarship as easily or other scholarship as easily, yeah, it's not as much meat on that bone in what we're given. So
It used to be the Book of Mormon, the Bible, with more plot holes, but they took out the subtitle somewhere around 1903, I think.
yeah, yeah. Then they changed it with another one. It's kind of like kind of like changing the introduction, and once they had that DNA stuff come up. Anyway, um,
I'm sorry, guys. In Texas, apparently we have angered the gods, and it is so cold. Yet, like I was in a t-shirt and shorts a couple days ago. Today, I'm so cold. So I'm
it's
I'm
yeah, the weather of late has been. I would just like to remind any of the conservatives in the audience that climate change is real and the effects of it are actively happening right now. So,
I was gonna
um,
say climate change. What?
and with that, why don't we get into some Book of Mormon here? We're going to do a little
Woo!
bit of a different format this week. So usually we've had slides prepared and we have something to kind of go through that way. This week, no slides. We are just going to jam with what the Book of Mormon has on offer. Let us know what you think about this style because we might do that in other sections that are a little bit less scholarly, a little where there's a little bit more of this kind of we're just dealing with uh, certain specific religious claims rather than something that's actually meaty. Um, we may come back to this format. So let us know if you like it. And if not, then we will completely abandon it and go with something else.
And we don't care. We're gonna do it anyway. I'm just kidding. We wouldn't do that. We love you guys. I got my Book of Mormon right here.
Excellent. I've got mine and I'm sharing it here on the screen as well. We are going right to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints website. I'm just going to use their page for everything. So we have
That's
here in
smarter.
Second Nephi 6, we have the words of Jacob, the brother of Nephi, which he spake unto the people of Nephi. It's interesting. This is all a dictation, supposedly, then that Jacob is giving and somebody is writing it down and then Nephi and or Jacob will be putting this into the small plates after the words are spoken, but it would seem that we are starting a sermon by Jacob here in Second Nephi 6. um, I
Yeah,
we
this
had a little bit of
whole. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say I was normally a very heavy scripture marker. And there is
Mhm.
just, I didn't mark anything for this whole part. So, like building up
That
to, it's everywhere, but
there is some like there are a lot of like really little things that I think are kind of interesting, but as far as big like thematic ideas, there isn't quite as much in this section exactly as you're noting. So like here in verse 2, Jacob having been called of God and ordained after the manner of his holy order and consecrated by my brother Nephi. So this holy order is an early like reference to what would eventually be the Melchizedek priesthood. And that is interesting, but it's also not so explicitly stated that that's what we're working with here.
right.
And we kind of already talked last week about the Solomon's Temple issue. And this is just, we would just be rehashing kind of that same issue to go into that here. So yeah, there's a lot of rehashing of issues I think we'll see as well because we have Deutero Isaiah in chapters 7 and 8, and we've done that. I think though that what is interesting here is what Jacob has to say in verses 4 and 5 about why he is going for the words of Isaiah.
Would you like
Um,
for me to read this?
could you read verses 4 and 5, please?
I would.
Thank you.
Um, and now, behold, I would speak unto you concerning things which are and which are to come. Wherefore I would read you the words of Isaiah, and they are the words which my brother has desired that I should speak unto you. And I speak unto you for your sakes, that ye may learn and glorify the name of your God. And now the words which I shall read are they which Isaiah spake concerning all the house of Israel. Wherefore they may be likened unto you, for ye are of the house of Israel. And there are many things which have been spoken by Isaiah, which may be likened unto you, and because you are of the house of Israel.
So just the we've talked about this a little bit. We talked about this somewhat in the Deutero Isaiah section, and we'll talk about it more next week when we start getting into the Proto Isaiah chapters.
Woo!
Very much exciting stuff. But it's not wholly accurate what Jacob is saying here about the words of Isaiah. For
Yeah.
one, he's talking about the things which are and which are to come. Isaiah, especially Proto Isaiah, is talking about some very proximate events. There is this intention by uh, especially like Christian scholars or Christian apologists to try to make Isaiah talking about multiple things at the same time. So he's prophesying about the soon to come destruction of the kingdom of Israel. He's talking about the meridian of time with Jesus Christ, and he's talking about the second coming all at the same time. And that is the paradigm that Jacob is trying to put forward, but that's really not what anyone who is more critically studying Isaiah would come out with. Isaiah is talking about proximate events. He's talking about
I'm
events
still
that are.
here.
You are still here. Good. He is talking about events that are soon to pass relative to his time, but he is not talking about Jesus. He's not talking about the second coming. He's not talking about the latter days. Like that is not what's under discussion
Right.
anywhere in Isaiah.
Right.
But that is definitely what Jacob wants it to be about,
You
which
know
is
what, Jacob?
consistent.
You do
Yeah.
you. Just branch out, baby.
um, yeah, that's kind of what I want to say on his reference to or his reasons for talking about Isaiah. I think, but looping into that again, he is very focused, especially on this idea of Isaiah prophesying of Jesus, and that is again something that the gospel writers, people who are trying to construct Christian theology,
Mhm.
will do. They will try and pull the Old Testament ideas that had nothing to do with Jesus
Yeah,
and make them about Jesus.
of course.
Or they will try to take the historical Jesus, whoever he was and however he was, and fit him into Old Testament prophecy that may or may not have had anything to do with a first century CE messianic apocalyptic figure.
Correct.
And yeah, I guess this is a good time. I did you got a chance to watch the Satan's Guide to the Bible? I loved that, and it talks about like these ideas as well a bit in there,
Yes.
and like really solid actually good summary and like introductory summary into some of the biblical scholarship that's out there, and it helped me to put
Yes.
together a couple of ideas as well that I hadn't really dawned on me before. But yeah, it was a good presentation of all of that, and the Christian apologists, especially in the evangelical space, are just hating it.
Of course. Of course.
It's fantastic. So this will be the obligatory Dan McClellan plug for the week.
Woo, Dan!
I think we managed to go the whole last week without a Dan McClellan reference, so we got to make up for it here.
I was going to say we need extras today. Kip, we're going to need you on your point there, Barry.
Yeah. So Kip Davis posted a few other scholars whose names are slipping my mind, but Dan McClellan was also on there. So I've got 50% of that panel on there, and they were they were talking about the Satan's Guide to the Bible and one of the responses to that. Really good stuff. Highly recommend it.
Agreed.
Just good, solid scholarship and a good discussion of why some of the apologetic arguments against that particular video and that particular set of scholarship was less than good. And then Inspiring Philosophy, a Christian apologist channel, did a review of the Satan's Guide to the Bible as well that I tuned into. I think they were on for like almost 3 hours. And Kip Davis was in the live chat on that with some really good comments. Recommend all of it. It's entertaining, interesting stuff, and just anyway, this particular
it's entertaining and it teaches you against your will, even if you're going into it just for the entertainment of it, and you're not going into it for the scholarship of it. You're going to learn something anyway because it's really good.
I agree. And I think that Jacob here could have used some of that scholarship because as somebody who should have been aware of these issues, because he's living in the day. Yeah. Jacob was already indoctrinated with that evangelical style Christian theology. So
look at him being so ahead of his time.
Quite ahead of his time. A real Renaissance man with
hipster.
With respect
he
to
was
that.
The first official hipster.
So one of the things that I find interesting in here is that we've had it mentioned that Jacob is speaking, and Jacob is speaking because Nephi wanted him to talk. That was in verse 4, where he's saying that this is what I'm talking about. My brother wanted me to say that. And there's some intervening verses that we're just kind of glossing over here. But he talks about having it revealed to him that the Babylonian captivity has happened, that Israel's been taken into exile into Babylon. And this is like the third time that's been mentioned. But he's had it revealed to him by the Lord that has occurred and that they should return again. And he has also had this revelation of the Lord that there would be this Messiah figure, and that the Lord would manifest himself, in verse 9, manifest himself unto them, the Jews, in the flesh. And after he should manifest himself, they should scourge him and crucify him. And this is according to the words of the angel who spake it unto me. Now, at this point in time, in this dialogue, we don't have I don't think we've had a mention of an angel talking to him. I'm looking through verses 2 and 3 here, and I don't see a mention of an angel talking to Jacob. Now, in chapter 10, we'll get to it. We'll loop back to this, but in chapter 10, he will mention this angel again. But there's this cross-reference here for, if you do scourge, it just comes up with a topical guide, betrayal of Jesus. But crucify comes up with a reference to 1 Nephi 19. And this is where Nephi is doing his summary of everything before he dives into his use of Deutero-Isaiah. And
like brother
like brother here. And what he mentions is that the crucifixion, so what the angel says is that the Lord would appear, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would appear as a man into the hands of wicked men, according to the words of an angel. So the scourging might be according to the words of the angel, but the crucifying is according to the words of Zenock and Nahum. And Zenos is the one that then would go on and mention the sepulcher. Now, these are all prophets that only exist in the Book of Mormon. And so they can say whatever Joseph wants an Old Testament prophet to have specifically said about Jesus.
Doesn't Zenos sound like, who is the deity for Scientology? It sounds
Zeno.
a lot like, I was going to say that sounds a lot like that guy. But I think it's a different.
Are you suggesting that L. Ron Hubbard, that the founder of our great wait, we're not Scientologists, that L. Ron Hubbard was inspired by the Book of Mormon? Would you suggest such a thing? Because I honestly wouldn't.
No, what? I was just having that thought that popped out of my head, and I thought that would be a good time to share it.
I think that one of your body thetans is overtaking you and causing you to utter things that you otherwise wouldn't.
I must repent.
You need to go clear, Lolo.
And I need to give $10,000 to the Scientology church because that'll help too.
You do, and you need to go through another auditing session.
I mean, honestly, I get it.
Where is your e-meter? We're not Scientologists.
Not at all. No. What?
Okay, so
I'm so glad you smelled what I was stepping in there.
Yeah, sorry, I'm now distracted by the thought of Xenu sending all of those poor aliens to be destroyed in the gigantic volcanoes.
Xenu.
We are so getting like labeled, blacklisted here as repressive persons.
Now, when exactly do we? Oh God, Danny Zuko. When does he start writing us hate mail? I can't believe I forgot his.
I think that we're
John Travolta. There we go.
Yeah, John Travolta. I think we'll be getting the hate mail from John Travolta anytime soon.
Because
and we'll have R. Kelly singing about why is Tom Cruise in the closet.
Because all I got to say about this is the chances that Scientology is real are about as real as this being a historical document, which are both about as real as John Travolta's bangs. Because if you've seen those, John, come on.
I would say that you're onto something there, actually.
They're all connected.
Yeah, this is in fact all connected, and what we are going to see is that I got nothing, honestly. I was trying to make a great transition here, and there just is nothing.
No, sorry.
Unfortunately, Jacob does not give me much to work with to tie in with Xenu and Scientology as much as I would actually like. I know he should have been writing about Dianetics long before.
I mean, if he really wanted to be ahead of his time.
And that would have added like a whole I
really felt like it would have helped us.
I would have added a whole extra century beyond Joseph Smith, you know?
Okay.
All right.
I'm back to a serious podcaster. I'm back
to being a serious and earnest podcast this week.
No, we're good. Carry on, Perry.
I will carry on as a wayward son. One thing that I did want to dive into here is a little bit about like what is actually in Deutero-Isaiah, which we'll look at a little bit here with 7 and 8, and we'll compare that a bit when we get to Proto-Isaiah, and hopefully that will help the audience here to see exactly how Proto-Isaiah and Deutero-Isaiah are just very, very different, and why
Mhm.
scholars will look at that and say these are different authors. Um,
Because they
and
are.
yeah, they are, and I think it's really kind of obvious when you are aware of that scholarship, and then it's just obvious. You start to see it just much, much, much more clearly. And for instance, here we have in verse 1, we have the Lord speaking to Israel, and he is, essentially, like, we're talking about, like, all the suffering and all of the pain and all of the terrible things that have happened to Israel, and they can be crying out in their has the Lord forsaken us, kind of a thing. And the Lord will offer comfort. Like, Adonai is all about comfort for
Mhm.
Israel in Deutero-Isaiah, which makes sense as a post-exilic text. And he's saying, have I put thee away? Have I cast thee off forever? Where's the bill of your mother's divorcement? To whom have I put you away? Which of your creditors have I sold you to? And, like, he's saying, like, I haven't done, like, these things. I haven't cast you off. I will gather you again.
Yeah.
And I have the power to make that work. And that's what verse 2 is talking about, is that, like, it's not that I can't redeem you. I have the power to redeem you. I can do these great miracles. Um, and let's see here. Um, The Lord is near, he justifieth me. Who will contend with me? Let us stand together. Who's mine adversary? Let him come near me. This is verse 8. And I will smite with him, this with the strength of my mouth, and the Lord God will help me. And all they who shall condemn me, behold, they shall wax old as a garment, and the moth shall eat them up. Like, it's the destruction, like, Adonai is now
Right.
acting to comfort Israel and to destroy its enemies, where in Proto-Isaiah, what we'll see is a lot of, like, Israel is going to suffer, and there's not a whole lot of comfort.
Right.
And, like, the signs that come in, like, a lot of the things that are seen as, like, messianic signs in by Christians in Proto-Isaiah
Mhm.
are really like these, like, warning signs of the impending destruction that's going to come to Israel.
Yeah.
There really is not a lot of comfort in Proto-Isaiah.
I
A
was
lot of
gonna
warnings.
say.
A lot of warnings, and a lot of, like, this nation is gonna attack and they're gonna do these things, and um, the Lord's hand will be upon them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, And if we go to chapter 8, the Lord shall comfort Zion, verse 3, right? He will comfort all her
Totally
waste places, make her wilderness
com
like Eden. So
totally different vibe.
that's a
Totally.
real that's a really early reference to Eden. Interesting.
Because
Um,
at this point, what time frame would this be at? What time frame would this have? Okay, I mean, I know what time frame it was written in, but when was historically Jacob supposed to be living in? This very real
so
person who lived and totally said this stuff.
all right. So in chapter 5, Nephi says it's been 40 years. And so they would
Okay.
have left in 597 BCE. So that would put us then at 557
Okay.
BCE. And then um, this is at some point in time after that 40-year mark of.
Okay.
And you'll see that in the chapter heading where it gives the date range, it's saying 559 to 545 BC.
Mhm.
That is for the idea that Zedekiah's reign began in 600 BCE, which is off by a few years.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm so totally not an Eden um yeah,
Well,
reference would
so
be
yeah, so it doesn't quite make sense yet. Maybe, I mean, it's possible that like the idea of the story of Eden was in development, um, but it wouldn't have existed in the way that we have it today.
right,
And so
not in this way.
where it's being used by the author of Deutero-Isaiah here, it's Deutero-Isaiah would be writing
Mhm.
post-exile, and so the development of that myth it would be further along. Whether or not it's in the state that we have it today, I'm not 100% certain on, but it would have been present in some form. And
Okay.
um, yeah, I'm trying to remember from like the documentary hypothesis of which author is writing about which piece. It gets really complicated. I think it's like the P source and the L source are writing for um, Genesis 1, 2, and 3. And I
Okay.
believe that all of those are post-exilic. It's the D
Okay.
source, the Deuteronomistic source that is pre-exilic, mostly. And I might have some of those dates off. And there's, I think it's P, L, and J, and D.
Okay.
Anyway, we're stretching a little bit into what I can actually recall in the scholarship here. I haven't dived too deep into the documentary hypothesis. Um, most of the time that I've had that discussed is in relation to Genesis 1 and 2, because
Hmm.
if you read Genesis 1, you have one creation account, and then in Genesis 2, you have a different creation account, and then they just got stapled against each other. And yeah, it shows that there are multiple authors in that section. Um,
Which nobody is surprised by. I mean, it's shocking. What? Whew!
yeah, I know. Like nobody should be surprised by this at this point, with how much we've dived into all of this, but it is a huge point of contention
Oh yeah.
in Christian apologetic circles. You can see a
Oh.
lot of apologetic material of
Mm.
kind of pushing back against the documentary hypothesis. They do not like it.
Which,
Um, yeah.
I mean, so I know I had spoken to you a little bit in the pregame, and I will tell everybody else now. I spoke with somebody from the Community of Christ Church earlier this week, and being able to take away the Book of Mormon has to 100% be a historical document, and there's got to be proof, and we've got to it is a document. This is basically like National Geographic. Being able to take that mindset away, I gained so much more from the Book of Mormon in that aspect, and with that mindset, than I do with the historical mindset. There was just
Right.
so many things kind of tripping me up that way, that being able to take that away, I gained so much more from the Book of Mormon this way.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't understand why. I guess I do, but I mean, I just think it's
Yeah.
silly to get hung up on that.
I think that you'll get that there's some interesting spots that'll be kind of cool to discuss from that perspective when we get later on into Second Nephi as well.
Uh-huh.
There's just this insistent use of Isaiah in the mid part here of Second Nephi, and as much as we're kind of you know taking it a bit lightly and throwing some jokes around while we get through it, like this is where most readers of the Book of Mormon stop,
Oh yeah.
because it is dry.
Oh
um, and it doesn't respect what Isaiah is all about. It tries to make Isaiah into something that it's not. When you read Isaiah through a kind of an incorrect lens, it is
yeah.
difficult to understand. But when you read Isaiah for what Isaiah is, it's
Yes.
pretty. It's yeah, it gets a lot clearer. Um, you get the awake here in 8:9. Awake, awake, put on strength, O arm of the Lord. Awake as in the ancient days. Art
Yeah.
thou not he that hath cut Rahab and wounded the dragon? Like you get that, and thou not art thou not he who hath dried the sea, the waters of the great deep? Now you get
Yeah.
this like this call for the Lord, and the Lord the or putting on the strength of the Lord who has done
Hmm.
these great things, right? You are calling Israel, who has been in exile, and is seeking comfort, seeking to rebuild itself, to basically put on this strength and to see this great strength in Adonai, and to bring it for themselves, and then to
Hmm.
understand that in their sorrow and in their mourning they will have gladness and joy. Verse 11 is jumping into those ideas,
Yeah.
right? Um, if this has to be about Jesus, it doesn't make as much sense.
Right.
But if it's about returning from the exile and finding comfort in Adonai, it's really clear.
Yeah.
Um, And Joseph Smith did say that Isaiah is the most clearly written of the books, and you just need to have access to and then later on the Book of Mormon says that if you have the spirit of prophecy, then Isaiah is really, really clear. If you know what you're looking for, it's clear.
Yeah.
If you know if you understand the context, if you can put yourself in the frame of mind to the best of your ability, right? Because the past is a foreign country. But if you can put
Right.
yourself into the frame of mind as well as possible into who this was written for, what period this was written for, it does become clear.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to make it about something that it's not, yeah, it's confusing.
When it's always for me, and if my old seminary teacher ever sees this, you rocked. It's not you, baby girl. Everything was liken it unto yourself. Look at what they're trying to teach you for the latter days, which would be today, our time here.
Mm-hmm.
What is he trying to say to you? And I'm looking through this and I'm like, I have no effing idea what he's trying to say to me. But being a grown more grown, I don't consider myself an adult in any right, but being a more grown person than I used to be then, historically speaking, if you look at what was happening at their time, what they were going through, it doesn't lessen the gifts and the information that the scriptures are giving us and what they can offer us, but
Mm-hmm.
look at it through their lens, not ours, because
Mm-hmm.
that's where we're really going to get whatever we can take from this. It doesn't have to be a historical document for us. It doesn't have to be a historical document, period.
Mm-hmm. I could imagine doing a reading of this where understanding that this has nothing to do with Jesus. This is not talking about Jesus at all.
Yes.
It's not talking about the latter days at all. It is talking about the Jews returning from exile and finding comfort in Adonai. And then if I were a preacher trying to then take that lesson, I would say something along the lines of, okay, in what ways do we experience our own exiles, our own being taken into places that we are not prepared for, where we feel alone, where we feel trapped, where we feel like the world is against us, where everything is stacked against us. And then how can we find comfort and strength through our own beliefs, through our own convictions? What can we do despite being in exile to become stronger, to become stronger in our values and in the way that we are trying to make the world a better place? That's how I would try to present this.
Yeah.
If I have to make this about Jesus, I'm going to have a hard time.
Man, well, and it's just so my background, I'll be honest, I don't remember exactly how much information I gave about my religious past. I come from a Southern Baptist on my father's side, and a lot of religions on my mom's side. We went through a Hare Krishna phase on my mother's side. Very eclectic, open-minded, kind of doesn't need to fit in a box on mom's side. So it was, I was somewhere between Joel Osteen and a hippie that lives in the woods. So that's my religious background. And when I did visit Protestant churches, mainly the Baptist church, it was, you got to follow Jesus and you have to follow God because he's holding you in his hand over a fiery pit from hell. And if you don't love Jesus and do what he says, he's just going to drop you in. And so it was let's scare you to death into loving God and following Jesus. That's not love. That's Machiavellian. And, that made God so unreachable for me. And I feel like I can't be the only one that felt that, that made God unapproachable. That made God effing terrifying to me. That was not something, oh my God, why would anybody want to follow him? No, thank you. I mean, even Satan's looking better at this point, But to have that God that's like, that there doesn't have to be that terrorist into belief effect. But a God, reading the scriptures from a point of view of these are people. These are people who go through crap every day. These are people who are going through hard stuff. God is giving them peace. This is how God's giving them peace. How would that not be relevant no matter what time frame you're coming from? They don't have to be talking about 9/11 back in 655 BC for me to be able to connect to what they have to say. They
Mhm.
don't have to be talking about anything that has to do with my time or my where I live and in what period of time I live in, because problems are the same at the base. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter if you're in exile or the Babylonians or whatever, or Donald Trump, 9/11. It doesn't matter what your demons look like. Ha! See what I did there? Called Donald Trump a demon. It doesn't matter what your demons are, because problems are problems at the same. And if religions in general can stop trying so hard to shove the historicity down our throat and you have to look at this through the modern day lens, I really think that
Mhm.
would make God much more reachable for so many people.
Mhm.
Okay, so that was
Yeah.
my soapbox. I'm done.
As a non-believer, I agree. You know, in that context, I definitely agree with that. It's yeah, the way that scripture can be applied is you can take it for what it is and then try to learn human lessons from that, or you can try to take it as something that prescribes how you should act today. And if you try to take it in the latter, you're gonna end up doing something that's not great, because those scriptures are written from the perspective of human beings with their own biases, their own worldview, their own flawed understanding of humanity, and they're doing the best that they can, we hope, but they are still deeply flawed. And if you're not able to interrogate that, if you take it as prescriptive that you have to do it this way, you're going to be stuck with a deeply flawed understanding of humanity and of basically being a good person in the world.
do
And
you do you mean to say that you would become somebody who could yell at gay couples and get mad at Starbucks cups?
right, right.
Oh,
That's exactly it. And instead of being somebody who is willing to learn, who's willing to recognize that, don't have all the answers. None of us have all of the answers.
ain't that some
Um,
truth?
I mean, one of the most terrifying things about deconstructing religion is going from a position of having, if not all of the answers, access to all of the answers, to a state of we don't really know anything, do we?
Yeah,
And
that's
just having
terrifying.
to just having to be cool with that.
That's really hard.
It's hard. That is
Yeah.
one of the hardest parts about deconstruction. Um, yeah. To your point too about Second Nephi 9 is exactly the type of thing that you're talking about with a fire and brimstone
Hmm.
sermon. This is a 19th century Protestant sermon, if there ever was one.
Boy,
And
howdy.
um, there's a lot here. We are going to skip over most of it because there is some
Oh,
stuff
what a
about. I
shame.
know. We could go through and try to read this
Oh, we
as
don't
though we
have to.
were 19th century
Oh,
Protestant ministers, and it would be pretty obvious. Um, there are some things in here that it's not that there isn't anything worth discussing in all of this. There are some things that are worth it, but they are small. And we'll discuss these topics in other settings where they're a little bit more developed. This section is actually a decently good summary of some of the most fiery parts of the Book of Mormon, um,
I
and
always
all these ideas.
pictured this is something that like Jim Jones wrote as he's planning on preaching this right before they hand out the cups of Kool-Aid. That's always the kind of. I'm so
It's
sorry. I'm
hot.
getting us canceled. We're going to get us
You're getting
canceled.
us demonetized,
I'm
canceled,
so sorry.
kicked off of YouTube.
I'm so
Um,
sorry.
So the first part of this that I want to talk about, though, is something that I find very, very relevant because this has been used against me before. Um, in kind of all stages of my faith journey. So, verse 28 and 29. Would you like to read verses 28 and 29?
Yes, I am not prepared. Sorry, I had sat my book down.
The Boy Scout motto.
I know I'm the worst Boy Scout Mormon girl ever.
You are the worst Boy Scout Mormon girl ever, indeed.
You tell me where. Hang on. Okay.
Chapter 9, 28 and 29.
28 and 29? Okay, that's what I was looking for. 28 and 29, I'm ready. Oh, that cunning plan of the evil one. Oh, the vainness, the frailties, and the foolishness of men. When they are learned, they think they are wise, and when they hearken not unto the counsel of God, for they set it aside, supposing they know of themselves, wherefore their wisdom is foolishness. There's my dog agreeing. That's right. Amen, baby. And it profit them not, and they shall perish. But to be learned is good if they hearken unto the counsels of God.
So the way that this has been used is really as a thought-stopping method, and it drives me crazy because to be, if you're learning about something, like if you have some education on some topic and that becomes a shelf item for you, that one of those things that you're concerned about with the gospel, but you're going to put it on the shelf, then it's foolishness to consider that to be a problem at all. But hey, at least you're listening to the counsels of God because you're willing to put that thing that you learned on the shelf. But to actually interrogate it, to actually dive into it and really learn about it, to where J. Reuben Clark, who was a racist, who I will also quote here because he had a useful quote, said that if we have the truth, then it cannot be harmed. But if we have not the truth, then it ought to be harmed, right? Through investigation. And learn about these things, dive into them, put pressure on them, study them, be critical about that. But to do that, basically, if you don't land on the, this is all true, or this is what God has said, or whatever, if you land in that camp, well, you got through all that education, you learned all that stuff, and now you think yourself so wise. You think yourself smarter than God. And who are you to think that way? And so I don't have to listen to you. I don't have to listen to the things that you're saying because of that. It's you bring up like biblical scholarship. You talk about the Deutero-Isaiah problem. Let's talk about the Deutero-Isaiah problem for a little bit, and then you could just use this scripture right here as a thought-stopping technique to get yourself out of even considering what was said. I do not like these verses for that reason. I find this to be almost as harmful as the line in the temple about the philosophies of men mingled with scripture.
Yes.
Together, I think that those end up really creating a way for people to just turn off their brains and not consider what these ideas actually are, what they're saying, or to accept just the lamest of apologetics to answer some question and to not actually interrogate the apologetics together to see if they make sense.
Let's keep them dumb, because as long as they're not busy at that book learning, they can be busy serving us in the Lord.
Right? In the Lord, with your prayers. That was a Key and Peele reference. You ever see that sketch?
I love it.
With your prayers.
With your prayers.
Love it. It's fantastic.
Okay. I love it. I was loving that. I love them. Okay, sorry.
When I was doing the research for this section, just to see if there was something in the apologetic space to tackle, I really wanted to find if there was something interesting to really sink our teeth into and to really do something that's different than what the manual would put out.
This is some solid logic you're fixing to share with us there, Perry.
This is just peak apologetics. Now, I want to go back for a second to our very first episode. where we talked about the automatic writing hypothesis for Book of Mormon origins,
Oh, we were
and
so
how
young back then.
we were so young and naive, it was so long ago. With the apologetic writing hypothesis, you have the idea that Joseph Smith is really just producing this with his own thoughts, and that he's doing some method of accessing his subconscious, believes
Peyote.
himself to be other mushrooms or something, or just being high on Jesus,
Love that
as we
God.
would say, given what Pentecostals are able to do without drugs. I'm just saying.
You know what? I agree. I have a Pentecostal uncle, and I want some of whatever spirit they're on.
there is you can do mind alteration without drugs, though there were also things that Joseph had easy access to that could have facilitated this type of work as well. Now, regardless of the particular method, he is accessing his subconscious, channeling a spirit to produce the text of the Book of Mormon and giving an oral dictation of all of that.
Sure.
Right. And so now, if this were a translation, we would expect the translator, at least a good translator, a competent translator, a translator with access to the best possible tools, i.e., God, e.g., God,
and magic rocks and a hat.
Yeah, the best tools, right? Only the best. Right. We would expect such a translator to be almost entirely invisible, right? A good translation is almost invisible, such that if you are familiar with the native language and you are familiar with the translated language, they would basically feel the same. They would sound similar. Right. Now, that's really, really difficult to do. And most translations, to some extent or another, fail at that task. But we have access to God magic, right? We have access to the Holy Spirit that's supposed to be giving, like, this is translated by the gift and power of God, not by any mortal means. This is God powers that are going into producing this translation. So this translation should be
anti-Semitic angels. We've got those too. Don't forget the anti-Semitic angels.
We've got that. We'll get to that. You're jumping ahead here.
I'm sorry. I got excited. Carry on. We'll get to Mel Gibson as an angel later.
We will get to the Mel Gibson angel later. The pre-existent just man who cannot shake your hand. We will get to that later. But what we instead see in the Book of Mormon is a lot of 19th century fingerprints, and we've talked about some of those. And that would be expected with the automatic writing theory. That would be expected with some of the other naturalistic origin hypotheses as well. So I'm not dismissing those with that statement, but I do favor at about a 60-40, 55-45, the automatic writing hypothesis over other naturalistic explanations. Mm-hmm. So let's see what apologists have to say here, because there's this good question. It comes up of so why do some New Testament phrases appear in the Book of Mormon? And there are some of the New Testament phrases are here in 2 Nephi 9. In fact, the way that I found it was Google searching 2 Nephi 9 fair, and it produced this article because 2 Nephi 9 is just filled with New Testament phrases. Okay. So. Yeah. What Fair has to say on this is that critics Gerald and Sandra Tanner present many examples of supposed borrowing of New Testament phrases by the Book of Mormon. When lined up in a list without the text to compare, these can seem impressive. When the small amount of text which some have in common is seen, however, they become less convincing. So if you've watched any of like the Mormon stories with Gerald and Sandra Tanner, or with Sandra Tanner,
oh yeah, love it.
Which she's great, honestly. She gets such a bad rap from apologists who just can't handle what she's presenting. Honestly,
I just really like her personally. She just seems like somebody cool.
She just seems like a chill lady. Yes. You know? She just seems really great. Yeah. She was on this last week talking about the new D. Michael Quinn memoir as well, which was really interesting because of the conflicts that Gerald and Sandra had with D. Michael Quinn. Just really really kind of cool to hear their perspective on all of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, coming back to this, so the Tanners are saying that there are these New Testament phrases. It is not only the Tanners that are saying this, by the way, but the Tanners are saying it. So we're going to point out the Tanners. Now, here's what the Tanners don't do. Okay, so this is fair. I want to remind you this is one of the largest apologetic arms of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That they're going to be putting forward just their best defense here against some of the worst critics, the worst anti-Mormon critics that are out there. Okay, so and I want you to have in the back of your mind Brian Hales's "Where did the words come from?" as we go through this. Okay, so. Furthermore, the Tanners do nothing to explore how common such phrases, such New Testament phrases, were in the preaching, writing, and speaking of Joseph's day. As discussed on the main page, many modern speakers use Shakespearean terms every day without realizing it, which there are also Shakespearean phrases in the Book of Mormon, so it's really funny. The reason why it's on the main page is because of all the Shakespearean stuff that's in the Book of Mormon that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Now, some biblical phrases were simply part of the vocabulary of whose day? Joseph's day. Okay, now Google Books is going to do some stuff to help us out here by allowing us to search from many publications from which century? Is it the 6th century BCE? No, from the 19th century CE. When who was writing? Joseph was writing. It provides an estimate of how common these phrases were in religious and other discussions. So there's a typo there, by the way. Fair, if you see this video, fix the typo. It should be other discussions, not other discussion. Anyway.
Come on, guys.
Seriously. How much money do you guys get from the church through other arms that are not the church? Anyway.
None, because all our money goes to Jesus.
So, yes, this is a religious discussion, right? The writing of the Book of Mormon is an inherently religious exercise. I think I can agree with that. This analysis is not to claim that Joseph read these books. Fair enough. I am, generally speaking, I am a minimalist in what Joseph had access to as much as possible. I try to lean towards Joseph just had the 1769 KJV and what was included in there. And if I can explain everything with just that, great. That's where I try to go, because anything else is just added assumption. But there, like the idea that he read the late war is pretty compelling for some of the language that's in there. Stuff like that. I mean, there's stuff that I think is decently compelling, but I do land in the minimalist camp. I will just go with just the Bible, okay? But simply that these phrases were in common, frequent use for religious discussions. Okay, so it's not that Joseph read these books. He's just familiar with this vocabulary. And since he attended many sermons and meetings, which, okay, granted, it seems unlikely that he would not have been exposed to them over and over again. I agree. 100% fair. Could not agree with you more. Furthermore, they were likely part of the common language of his era. Again, I agree with you.
Also accurate, yeah.
Yeah. Some approach the status of cliches that one would use almost without thinking or even knowing its source. Again, 100% agree for Joseph's day. But for Jacob, writing in the 6th century BCE, not so much. And again, like they're kind of making our case for us, so I have to thank them for that.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Fair. This is greatly appreciated that you're doing our work. But it's I was just very entertained by that article, because this is the answer. Brian Hales, Dr. Hales, if you are watching this by chance, by serious random chance, because you go wherever your name is mentioned, I don't know if you do that, but maybe you do.
Maybe.
I don't know. But if you are watching this, this is where the words come from. They come from Joseph's day. They come from Joseph's milieu.
Ta-da!
There's your answer to the question. Like
God, magic, and Joseph.
Yeah. It's Joseph Smith. Like this is all Joseph Smith throughout. Yeah. There is nothing that we have seen so far that rules out Joseph as the sole author of the text. Now, I do think that there are sections that he effectively plagiarized from other sources, not in the sense not in the sense of like he stole the Spalding manuscript or anything like that, or view of the Hebrews or any of those types of ideas. Like I'm not advocating for those positions. What I mean by that is Second Nephi 9 is a 19th century Protestant sermon.
It
And
really is.
I imagine he went to a Methodist church, heard something along the lines of that sermon, and just kind of repeated it back.
Yeah.
I would say the same thing probably with King Benjamin's speech in Mosiah. When we get there,
Oh,
that's
no
going to
doubt.
be like
No
it's
doubt.
the same type of thing in those spots. I think that he makes some inspired changes. He makes some changes on his own, but for the most part, he is just taking that and jotting it down.
Yeah.
So to answer Brian Hales, that's where the words come from. If that is the only objection, if that is the only valid objection to the automatic writing hypothesis, I think we just solved that only valid objection. And it doesn't mean that it's correct, but that would raise the confidence level of that
Just a
being
little.
again, doesn't mean that it's correct. It could be wrong for other reasons, but if that is the only valid objection to it, it's a pretty compelling hypothesis. So thank you, Brian, for your work on that paper for proving that the Book of Mormon was automatically written as well. They are doing all of the work for us. I love it. It's great.
I
Okay.
mean, really appreciate it. Do we put him on the payroll? How does that work?
Yeah, he can have a share of all of the profits that we have made so far.
It'll be in the mail, buddy.
We are obviously one of the largest podcasts and wealthiest podcasts in all of Mormonism. So
This
yeah, you are
blanket is
welcome to
Gucci.
it.
We're in
It's
the big
real
one.
fake fur. All right. Should we do the woe unto yous, or do you want to skip the woe unto yous?
Oh, I can't with the woe unto yous.
Yeah,
I can't.
It's a rough section, and
It really is.
I'm worried about it getting hostile, and I really don't want to do that. Yeah. I will just say that I have some feelings in this particular section, and if we find another relevant place to bring up those topics where it's a little bit more fully explored, we'll pull this back into that part of the conversation. Or maybe I'll do a special at some point in time where I just go off on this section. Yeah.
Oh, if we're doing that, I'm okay with that. We can go off. I didn't know it was that kind of mean podcast. Hold up.
I really don't want this podcast to this series to be that. But you know, I might be willing to do a special. Let us know if you would like a pair. Yeah, let us know in the comments if you'd like a Perry special on Second Nephi 9:30 through 38.
I would
let's
100% watch that. I would, yes. May I vote yes?
Let's go to chapter 10 here. Okay. So here's the fun thing that's going to happen in chapter 10. So I want you to remember that in chapter 6, we have Jacob starting to talk. He's talking because his brother wanted him to talk. And he does mention that he spoke to an angel, and that the angel told him that the Holy One of Israel would be crucified, right? And he uses the word Messiah over and over again. That is the word in chapter 6, okay?
Yes.
Now we're going to come all the way to chapter 10. We are still in the same speech, right? And now I, Jacob, speak unto you again. I mean, maybe it's a different one because he says the word again, but to me, this strikes as the same thing.
Yeah, the same thing.
Let me go back to the end of 9 just to make sure he didn't end and say something. Oh, no, he says he's going to talk to them tomorrow. Okay. At the end of chapter 9, he says, I'm going to talk to you tomorrow. All right. So this is the second sermon.
So he slept, and then
he slept.
All
right. Yeah. All right. So he's got in chapter 6, he's got the crucifixion of the Messiah. And then he's going to go to sleep after his fiery sermon. And now he's going to wake up the next day. And he talks about how there would be this redeemer that would come through, and that's why stuff is going to be restored. And then in verse 3, he says, wherefore, as I said unto you, it must needs be expedient that Christ, for in the last night the angel spake unto me that this should be his name, should come among the Jews. And then he's going to rehash all of that stuff. We're going to loop back onto this in just a second. But I want to deal with this Christ issue first. Okay. So the Messiah, who has been referred to as Messiah this whole time through.
Mm-hmm.
Messiah means anointed one, right? And this would have been a term that was used for like the Davidic kings. There are some other messiahs that are mentioned in the Old Testament. And in the New Testament, there was, or at the time of the writing of the New Testament, there was this idea that there would be a messianic figure who would restore the kingdom of David, who would sit
Mm-hmm.
upon the throne of David once again and restore the kingdom of Adonai to its former glory.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the milieu that Jesus of Nazareth is born into. And this is where, again, I recommend Ravi Aslan's. I probably have that his name messed up. I'm sorry. Zealot. I mentioned this before in a last episode, an earlier episode. Does a really good job of capturing this apocalyptic milieu
Yeah.
that Jesus of Nazareth was born into. So I recommend that book. And if I remember, I will put the link to that again and the references in the description below. Anyway, so there's this idea of the Messiah that's going to come, this anointed one of Israel that is going to come and deliver Israel from its oppressors
Mm-hmm.
and restore the Davidic throne. So the reason why Jesus is crucified by the Romans is because he is either claiming for himself or allowing claims to be made about him that indicate that he is this rightful heir to the throne of David, and that he would supplant the Roman authorities that are in place. And this is insurrectionist rhetoric. This is treason. This is why he's crucified, because of basically inciting rebellion against Rome. And that will then be retooled into some weird blasphemy claim by the gospel writers, because they, especially Matthew, want to pin the death of Jesus onto the Jewish leaders, not onto the Romans.
But Pontius, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, Pontius Pilate washes his hands, right? But Pontius
That
Pilate, yeah, he was not a great dude, actually.
no,
Yeah.
insane.
But also he would not have just capitulated to the Jewish leaders. Like, it doesn't actually make sense. There's a bunch of stuff on this.
Yeah.
And you can go to some of the New Testament scholarship for some of that stuff. But yeah, Pontius Pilate would not have just capitulated to the Jewish leaders like that. Like is suggested in the Gospels, just wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Okay, so the thing is that the term Messiah, which means anointed one, in Greek is Christ. Okay, so Christ means anointed one the same way that Messiah means anointed one. These are words
Just
that are
in
the
a
same
different
thing.
language.
They're just a different language, the same word. You're just translating into the Greek. And since the New Testament is written by Greek writing authors, they use the word Christ instead of Messiah to achieve the same thing. Now,
Right.
When I say Christ that way, I'm definitely doing like the Anglicization of the Greco word, which is something like Christus. I do not speak Greek. I do not speak first century AD Greek, and so my pronunciation will be off. But it is along those lines, and that eventually becomes the English word Christ through the Greek, which is itself a translation of the Hebrew and or Aramaic word Messiah.
So this would be not unlike how, I can't remember when the French or the English won at some point. That's why there's so many rivers called Avon, because they were asking, okay, what's this called? And the French were saying Avon. And it was like, that means river or whatever. And so they were like, oh, that's the name. Okay, well, we're going to call it Avon River. Well, it's just like saying river, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, I understand that.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things for the Book of Mormon. The New Testament authors understand this no problem. They have no issue with this.
No, yeah,
right?
I'm talking about Farm Boy Joseph.
But Joseph Smith would not know this, and
right.
Jacob would not be using the Greek word.
Okay.
There are definitely apologetics on this, and I probably could have dove into it, but it's just not worth looking at because the apologetics for it are going to be bad. Because what this is saying is that this should be his name, right? So this is trying to not say that anointed one is a title. It's trying to say that anointed one is a name.
Yeah.
Um, and even without that line, it's still a problem. Like,
Yeah.
why the switch?
Right.
The switch doesn't make sense for Jacob to do. It makes sense for Joseph Smith to do.
Yeah.
Because Joseph Smith would not have understood the distinction between the Old Testament use of the word Messiah and the New Testament use of the word Christ.
So, okay, that makes sense.
Okay. I think that we have belabored that point, but now we're going to get into the. Are you ready for more racism?
Oh, golly gee, yeah.
Did we not have enough racism last week? We just need more. Yay!
I live in
Okay,
Texas. It's what I
that is
live
gonna
on.
that is gonna be clipped out of context by somebody.
Of course. Of course it is.
Somebody is gonna clip that way out of context. Anyway, all right. So here's for the racism. So that Christ should come among the Jews, among those who are the more wicked part of the world, and they shall crucify him. For thus it behooveth our God, Adonai, and there is none other nation on earth that would crucify their God. So the anti-Semitism here. Remember, what we're saying is that what Jacob is saying here is that the Jews are the more wicked part of the world, and there is no other nation except for the Jews that would crucify their God.
Because everybody else is smarter and not as evil as those Jews.
Yep. Because if the mighty miracles wrought among them were wrought among other nations, they would know that it was God.
Of course. Because they're
Right.
super smart. They're not Jews.
Never mind that there's a whole Roman contingent in Israel that does not recognize Jesus and that actually does the work of crucifixion. Never mind that. Ignore that.
Nope.
It's the Jews.
We're not going to talk about that.
But because of
Don't look at
priestcraft
those
and
Romans
iniquities,
behind the counter.
Yeah,
I mean, behind the curtain.
Right. But because of priestcraft and iniquities, they at Jerusalem will stiffen their necks against him, that he be crucified. I mean, yeah, this is enough anti-Semitism to make the author of the Gospel of Matthew blush, honestly. And that's where the blood oath comes from. That is wildly anti-Semitic. Yeah, it's
and it's like in number 6, it's like, wherefore, because of their iniquities, destructions, famines, pestilence, and bloodshed shall come upon them, and they who shall not be destroyed shall be scattered among all nations. So it's like, it's okay the Holocaust happened. They had it coming. They had it coming.
That is what this is. Thank you, Chicago.
Yeah.
That really is what's being justified here.
Wow.
That basically the destructions by the Romans of the Second Temple and the dispersion into the diaspora, and all of that is now justified because only the Jews would do something so evil as this. If Jupiter had appeared to the Romans, they would not have killed Jupiter. If Ra had appeared before the Egyptians, they would not have killed Ra. But if Adonai in the form of Jesus Christ appears to the Jews, well, they are definitely wicked enough to do that.
Avi. Come on, guys.
It's it's not great. It's not great.
I'm not laughing. Yeah. I'm laughing. I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because it's like,
if we don't laugh, we'll cry kind of a thing. Yeah.
Yes. And how did little baby Lauren, who was so straight and narrow, how did I miss this?
I know. It's because you were brought up in a certain worldview that understood Christianity as a descending religion from Judaism. And so it's, in a way, the way that this is intended, if I'm going to be fair and charitable here, the way that I think that this is intended is, look, only the Jews would have done this, but we are successors to that, and so we are also equally indicted in this screed. Like, we are just as guilty, we are just as responsible, because we have seen the mighty miracles of Jesus Christ, and yet we sin and we do all these horrible things against him, and we know that this causes him pain and it causes him to effectively be crucified again. So we are no better as Christians. I think that if I'm being charitable, that is a reading you could go with.
Yeah, they just don't say that at
They
all. I
don't.
mean,
Yeah,
you're right. You could read
I
it
am
that
putting
way.
so much into the text to make that reading work.
I know it's like you're being way nicer way nicer to them than I think they deserve. But you're right.
It still doesn't solve the anti-Semitism issue,
No, it doesn't. But yeah,
but
yeah,
you know, it makes it a nicer version of anti-Semitism.
it's the kinder, gentler racism. We love it.
It's the real anti-Semitism is the friendship we made along the way. Oh my gosh.
I really feel like we should write our own Book of Mormon. It would be so much better.
Hey, the Hugh Nibley challenge here. Come on. Do you think you could write a Book of Mormon? Oh my gosh. Okay. So the note that I kind of want to go out on is not rampant anti-Semitism, but
Darn it.
But here in verse 16, just the last part of the verse, the last line here, for they who are not for me are against me, saith our God. And what that means is that God is a Sith Lord.
It's true.
Because only a Sith deals in absolutes. And if you are not with me, then you are my enemy is exactly what Anakin as Darth Vader says to Obi-Wan. And that is God quoting Anakin Skywalker. When time no longer matters, when you can reveal Deutero-Isaiah like this way and all of that, time no longer matters. God, through Jacob, is quoting Anakin Skywalker because that happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and God is a Sith Lord.
Obviously, you know what, that was how I knew the Book of Mormon was true.
Yeah, you know,
that's how I knew.
Because General Kenobi. Hello there. My favorite part of the Book of Mormon is when Captain Moroni is like up on top of the mount, standing against Amaron, and he says, "It's over, Amaron. I have the high ground." Just the best part.
Perry, you bring the Book of Mormon to life for me.
I just in a way that, you know, if Jeffrey R. Holland in General Conference can embellish a little bit with the story of Peter, I think I can embellish a little bit with the story of Captain Moroni.
Nope, it's not embellishment. I refuse. To me, it is true, and that's the hill I will stand on to get the high ground.
High ground.
Oh gosh.
All right. I think that we have caused enough grief to this particular section.
Well, it didn't have anything else in it, so it needed something.
Hopefully everybody managed to have some amount of fun with us today. I make no apologies for our particular contributions here. I only apologize for the contributions of Jacob, who, you know, man, come on, you can do a better job than that.
Clearly a time traveler. I get it.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I think is going on is at this point in time, Joseph Smith has now gotten the Lehite family to America, and he just needs to get to Mosiah because he's already written from Mosiah to the end, and if we can just get that done, we are done. And
you have somebody who's got 3 days of their senior year of high school left before summer, and they are just trying to make it through every day.
This is the senioritis section of the Book of Mormon. That's exactly what this is. This is the senioritis section. Yep. And that is going to continue all the way through Omni. Words of Mormon is not necessarily interesting, but it is an interesting device. So there's that. I will give credit that it is actually clever. But yeah, all the way through Omni, and especially Omni. My goodness, it is clear that Joseph Smith was doing the 19th century equivalent of phoning it in. By the time we got there, but we'll get there. We're
not even half. I know we can't say bad words. We're not even half cheeking it at this point. Joseph is quarter cheeking it at best. You know.
Yep. That is exactly what is going on at this point. But hey, we are going to dive into Proto-Isaiah next week, and we'll talk about some of the scholarship there. We're going to try to make Proto-Isaiah fun. I enjoy Isaiah to now that we're able to look at it more critically. So we'll
Right,
be
I do
talking
too.
about some of that stuff and some of the ways that Isaiah gets abused in in the broader Mormon circles, in the broader Christian circles, and some of the ways that is actually how was actually intended. And we'll do the best to represent scholarship and all of that, but recognizing we are not scholars, and so we will have our own limitations. So,
We really are, guys.
yeah.
I know I'm not anyway.
If there was any indication that we're not scholars, just watch the last hour or so of this episode for the clear evidence of that. So,
it's accurate.
All right. Thank you so much, Lola. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Barry. Bye, everybody.